Hello again. Well, we've reached the end of another week. How exciting. And it's lovely and sunny. And I'm thinking about what I might do tomorrow on Saturday. I've got tutoring to do on Sunday, so I get a one day weekend. And I think I'm going to spend it watching sport, probably a lot of sport. So I hope you enjoy yours, whatever you do. Maybe you've got revision to do, I don't know, or homework, or who knows what those teachers have set you to do. Anyway, I hope it all goes well. I've been thinking about last week's resignation. In fact, I think it was a week ago today, of Anneliese Dodds from Keir Starmer's government. And I think it is a resignation that A-level politics students should be taking notice of. I think it's going to prove to be very, I think it's going to prove an interesting development. I don't think it ends with her resignation. I think it's the start of something. And I want to explain what I mean. But first of all, let's just say it's a very recent example of collective ministerial responsibility, something I know students struggle with. Lots of students that I've taught over the years have misunderstood collective ministerial responsibility. Several have said to me that they thought it was when the entire government resigns because they're being collective in their responsibility. It is not that. It is when somebody resigns on the basis that they cannot agree with the policy that the government has set out. The government has to be united, has to take a united front. And it does that for several reasons. You can't have a government that argues with itself. Everything in the British system with regards to the Prime Minister and Cabinet is geared towards continuing to prove that they have the confidence of the House of Commons. And you can't do that if you're divided. Ultimately, that would mean the risk of losing votes in the House of Commons. If you lose votes in the House of Commons, you're on a slippery slope towards a general election. Simple as that. So governments have to be united. If a government doesn't like a policy, if a member of the government doesn't like a policy that the government is publicly stating and committed to, then they have to consider their position, or they have to just keep quiet about it and say that they agree with it. Anneliese Dodds decided that as Minister for International Development, she could not accept money being diverted from her brief and her projects towards extra spending for defence. And this is interesting. So that is why she's gone. Her resignation letter was a work of art. Her resignation letter, you can find it because they publish all of the resignation letters and they publish the responses from the Prime Minister. It was very statesmanlike. It was still managed to portray herself still as loyal to the Prime Minister and to the government's overall agenda. And it's really interesting for that because it came across as very genuine. It's not a resignation letter which is trying to cause the Prime Minister trouble, except there is one paragraph close to the beginning of it where she mentions the fiscal rules of the government. And she sets out how she was hoping for a discussion in government about how they spend how they spend money, how they might need to generate more money. And her point, I think, is going to come back to haunt the government because the world has changed, as she was pointing out. Keir Starmer went out of his way to announce that extra spending on defence before he went to meet Donald Trump to butter him up. That, combined with that letter from the King, was designed to make their relationship better, and it looks like it worked to begin with, at least. Let's see how it all develops. At the moment, I think Starmer, as I'm recording this, I haven't who knows what's happened, because things happen quickly. But at the moment, Starmer's looking good on the world stage, and that will help him domestically as well. Things can go pear-shaped very quickly. Even before this video is published, things could have changed. But anyway, I think that it is going to come back to haunt the government, because defence is an area that can just absorb money quickly. We don't know what this new world order is going to produce. We don't know whether defence is going to become an even bigger thing than what Starmer has already announced. And what he's already announced was just to please Trump. But, you know, the way people are talking about the possibility of even a world war is obviously worrying. And as we get, as things move along, it could be that there are more calls for defence spending. And Anneliese Dodds' point is, where does that money come from? You can't carry on reducing the budgets of everything else and just transferring that money towards defence. I mean, you can, but it means you're not paying for anything else. It means other projects have got to stop. And so you do, within government, have to have a discussion about those fiscal rules, and other countries are changing their rules so that they can afford extra defence spending. So where does money come from? Governments seem to conjure it up out of thin air. It can come from basically two areas if you're not just transferring it from one department to another. You've got the prospect of borrowing money and getting into further debt, or you've got the prospect of raising taxes. These two things are things that the Labour government has said we're quite strict on. We're not going to do that. That's it. Rachel Reeves just a few weeks ago was saying there's no more tax rises. They are doing this because they want to get the message across to the people that they're responsible, that they're careful, because it's our money, it's our country, and they're just custodians of it. But I think they've boxed themselves into a corner. But also I think that Anneliese Dodds is being realistic about it and saying they could forge a different path. If they decide actually that the world has changed so much that they need to change their rules on borrowing and taxation, there's a chance the public might get that. I think the public get the sense that the world has changed. Often I think the people are often quite well ahead of the politicians. And I think that when Labour got into power last year, I think the public were quite well to the left of the Labour leadership. And I think they maybe still are, even though the hype and the discussion is all around reform. Nigel Farage's party. Actually, there's indications that a lot of people have actually moved more towards the left, and you know, we've seen a rise of parties like the Greens, and we're seeing the SNP doing well again in Scotland now in terms of the polls. So I also just think that people would accept that the world has changed in fundamental ways, and that we might need to spend things in a different way. We might need to generate more money because of that. And so there's an opportunity there for Labour to take us all on that journey. Part of politics is setting out your end goal and showing to the public why you want to get to it and what it will mean. And it's something that this particular government is terrible at doing. You've got all of this idea of these 5 missions that they want, and then the steps towards the missions. And I'm not sure that I can remember what they all are, actually. If you're taking that approach, you need to explain it continuously, and you need to set out measurements that we know we've reached a particular part of this journey. Something that I think Tony Blair's government was particularly good at. But the crucial thing is you need to be a storyteller. I always get that sense from the Rock and Roll Politics podcast by Steve Richards. He talks very positively about how politicians have to be storytellers, and they have to take us where they want to go and show us what it means, and that means communicating brilliantly. And I just don't think the current government is there yet at being able to do that. But there is an opportunity here to say, right, we are going to have to spend more money. We've got to do things in a different way. The world has changed since last summer when we got elected. And that gives you then an opportunity to move the agenda on from things that people are already fed up of. People are already fed up of hearing about this £22 billion black hole and how the Tories have spent 14 years trashing the economy and stuff like that. People get tired of that very quickly. You can move on from that and you can start talking about how you're investing for the future. So Labour governments get into an awful lot of trouble for tax and spend policies. The media come down on them for suggesting public spending is going to occur. Public spending is presented, particularly by the Conservative press, as a terrible thing, where it could be different. It could be different. So you could argue that public spending is an investment that we all get a return on. Public services improve. As a result of public services improving, businesses can be more profitable. If our energy companies are great public services and costing us not as much, then business benefits. If our train services work on time and are cheaper, our businesses benefit. So there's a way of arguing that investing in all sorts of things, housing, infrastructure projects, actually improves the efficiency of the whole country, makes everybody achieve more, earn more money, and therefore helps the government collect more tax. No one's making these arguments, and the Labour Party is scared of making them. So, but I think there's now an opportunity to go down that route, and it'll be interesting to see if they take it. I pledged not to and ah in these videos as much, and I'm finding myself doing it. Very frustrating. And there we are again. So I think that resignation letter might have just looked like a minister resigning because of a principled position. They decided to get out. I think that what they were hoping to happen behind the scenes is almost inevitable, that there will need to be more money available for government, and therefore it seems sensible that the government should be discussing that internally. The other thing to bear in mind, I think, is that if one minister, or former minister now, was saying that and thinking that, I think it's likely that other ministers were thinking it too and saying it privately. And certainly there will be Labour MPs thinking it and wanting to have that discussion, particularly Labour MPs more on the left of the party, who will be very much in tune with the idea of wanting more borrowing and higher taxes, particularly for the rich. And that's another problem for Labour. If it's announced that taxes are going to go up, even if they only decide to raise taxes for the very richest, that is not what people will think, because the message will be tax rises, and everybody will think it affects everybody. But of course, it doesn't have to affect everybody. So there we are. That's what I'm thinking about that. I think this, if you're heading towards the exams, getting your head around collective ministerial responsibility and individual ministerial responsibility, understanding the differences, and getting some examples ready will be very useful. And watch out for this how this develops. The budget a few months ago might not be the end of the story of what Labour has to do. It might not actually be about trashing the record of the Conservatives. That might pale into insignificance compared to the challenges coming up. But we will see on that. Have a nice weekend. I'm going to go and watch some football tomorrow, I think. I'll go to the Loughborough University campus and watch their non-league side. See how they do. I don't know what to think about that. They're mid-table, so you never know quite what you're going to get. Have a nice weekend yourselves. If you're studying, I hope it goes well. Okay, have a good weekend. Bye-bye.